Hospitals are supposed to save lives, not test Darwin's theory in real time. 1. The man who tried to X-ray his own head. Some people Google their symptoms. This guy brought an entire radiology department to a standstill. He walked into an emergency room and demanded to use the X-ray machine on himself. Why? Because he felt thoughts moving around too fast and wanted to catch them on camera. When staff explained that's not how the human brain or cameras work, he accused them of hiding the government chip data. He then tried to operate the machine himself, pressing buttons like he was launching a space shuttle. Security had to intervene before he gave himself a full-body microwave tan. The real kicker? He stormed out yelling, "But you'll never erase the evidence." Sir, you didn't need an X-ray. You needed Wi-Fi restrictions and a nap. 2. The woman who tried to give birth to a ghost. A patient arrived in full labor, except she wasn't pregnant. She swore. She could feel the baby kicking, except the ultrasound showed nothing but gas and confidence. She told doctors it was a spirit child that floated in during a seance. When the doctors tried explaining biology, she snapped, "You're not qualified in spiritual midwifery." She then demanded an exorcism room instead of the delivery ward. After hours of debate, they gave her ginger ale, dimmed the lights, and pretended to deliver the ghost. She left with a baby blanket and the world's most convincing placebo effect. Somewhere out there, a nurse still tells this story to new hires as a warning. Never underestimate the power of conviction or indigestion. 3. The guy who superglued his wound and his hand. Emergency doctors have seen a lot, but even they weren't ready for the man who performed DIY surgery with a bottle of superglue. He'd sliced his hand chopping onions and decided the best fix was a permanent bandage. It worked great, until the glue hardened and fused his fingers together in an unholy web of stupidity. He arrived at the ER proudly saying, "It's sterile now." Technically, yes, because nothing alive could survive in that glue tomb. The staff spent 3 hours dissolving his hand back into functional pieces. When asked what he learned, he said, "Next time I'll use Gorilla Glue. It's stronger. Congratulations, sir. You just turned a minor cut into a full-blown sequel." 4. The man who tried to charge his phone in a surgical outlet. Hospitals have outlets everywhere, but they're not all for iPhones. One man learned this the hard way when he followed a nurse into an operating room, uninvited, and plugged his phone charger into a wall socket marked emergency power only. Within seconds, alarms blared like a NASA launch. Doctors froze mid-surgery. Machines started rebooting. The man, completely unfazed, just shrugged and said, "Wow, sensitive Wi-Fi in here." Security escorted him out. While he complained his battery anxiety was a medical condition. When asked why he walked into a restricted area clearly marked authorized personnel only, he replied, "I thought that meant important people, and my phone's important." Somewhere, an entire surgical team had to re-sterilize the room because one guy couldn't wait 5 minutes to check TikTok. The irony? His phone had 78% battery when they confiscated it. Humanity's greatest enemy isn't disease, it's low power mode. 5. The woman who tried to take her own X-rays home as souvenirs. You know those people who pocket hotel towels? Imagine that, but with medical scans. A woman in the radiology department demanded printed copies of her X-rays, not for a second opinion, but because she thought they would look cool framed above the fireplace. When staff refused, she accused them of gatekeeping her skeleton. After much negotiation, she settled on taking pictures of the screen with her iPhone. Flash on. The next day, she called back, complaining that the photos didn't glow like the real ones, and asked if she could borrow the machine for a minute. Hospital security added her to a list right between equipment thieves and people who ask if the defibrillator has Bluetooth. It's a miracle we made it to the moon when half the species still thinks an MRI is just a fancy camera for interior design. 6. The guy who used his IV stand as a scooter. Emergency rooms are not racetracks. But try telling that to the man who turned his IV stand into a personal scooter. He discovered that if he leaned just right, the wheels gave him decent acceleration. Within minutes, he was zooming down the hallway yelling, "Make way for the future of healthcare." Nurses chased him like a NASCAR pit crew, IV tubes flapping behind him like patriotic streamers. He crashed near the vending machine, spilling saline and Skittles across the floor. When security arrived, he was proudly explaining how gravity-assisted therapy could revolutionize mobility. The medical staff were less impressed. They spent an hour disinfecting the track of shame while he bragged about setting a hospital land speed record, or for the record, 3.4 miles per hour. It's not every day you see someone turn a medical emergency into a physics experiment gone wrong. 7. The woman who tried to pay her bill with a hug. Hospitals have seen some creative excuses for unpaid bills, but this one deserves its own Hall of Fame. After a 2-night stay, a woman approached the billing desk, stretched her arms wide, and said, "Let's just call it even." When the clerk politely explained that emotional currency wasn't accepted, she insisted, "Love is universal payment." She then tried to hug the staff into debt forgiveness, moving down the line like a motivational speaker on tour. When that didn't work, she offered to bless the hospital's energy field. Instead, security had to step in, though even they got an unsolicited hug attempt. Later, she left a 1-star Yelp review claiming the staff were emotionally unavailable. Somewhere in that hospital, an accountant had to file a report that literally read, "Payment attempt, spiritual in nature, declined." If Goodwill could pay the bills, this lady would own the whole building. 8. The man who tried to fix his broken arm with duct tape. Some people trust medicine, others trust hardware stores. A man walked into the ER with his arm wrapped from wrist to elbow in 3 layers of duct tape, looking like a rejected Marvel character named the Adhesive Avenger. When nurses asked what happened, he proudly explained he'd heard bones just need pressure. He'd fallen off a ladder, heard a crack, and instead of calling for help, grabbed the nearest roll of duct tape and went full redneck orthopedics. By the time he arrived, his arm had swollen like a balloon animal, and the tape had fused with his skin. Removing it took longer than the actual surgery. The ER doctor said, "Next time, just use a splint." The man replied, "You mean like 2 rulers and tape?" The doctor just sighed. Somewhere in a garage, there's a man who believes duct tape can fix the human skeleton. A spoiler, it can't. 9. The woman who tried to use the emergency shower for a spa day. Hospital safety showers exist for chemical accidents, not cucumber facials. A woman waiting for her husband's test results wandered into a maintenance room, saw the emergency shower, and assumed it was a complimentary wellness feature. She stripped down to her underwear, pulled the chain, and unleashed 50 gallons of freezing decontamination water. The deluge set off alarms in 3 departments. Nurses found her standing there shivering, insisting, "I thought hospitals offered hydrotherapy now." She demanded a towel and asked if there was an exfoliating scrub option. Security arrived, with blankets and a 1,000-yard stare. The staff spent hours drying the floor, while she left a complaint saying the spa experience was lacking aromatherapy. Hospitals save lives daily, but sometimes their hardest job is saving humanity from itself. 10. The man who tried to perform his own vasectomy. There are bad ideas, and then there's this. One middle-aged man showed up at the ER holding a bloody towel and a YouTube tutorial open on his phone. He'd decided professional surgery was too expensive and figured, how hard can it be? Armed with nail scissors, whiskey, and misplaced confidence, he made it about 30 seconds into the procedure before discovering pain isn't optional. Doctors rushed him to surgery, where they saved both his life and what little dignity he had left. When asked why he didn't at least consult a doctor first, he said, "Didn't want to get upsold on anesthesia." Somewhere in the bowels of the internet, another man is watching that same video right now thinking, "I could probably do that better." And that, dear viewer, is why emergency rooms never close. 11. The woman who tried to cure a fever with frozen peas. Forget cold compresses. One woman thought frozen peas were nature's thermometer. She arrived at the ER with green lumps taped to her head and neck, explaining she'd read online that peas draw out toxins. When nurses removed the melting vegetables, she asked them to keep the peas clean so she could reuse them later. The doctor calmly explained that her fever wasn't from bad vibes, but an actual infection. She wasn't convinced. "You doctors always underestimate vegetables," she said. After treatment, she left feeling better and left behind a trail of green mush that janitors are probably still finding. Somewhere, a nutritionist just fainted, and in a freezer somewhere, a new bag of peas is trembling, knowing it's next in line for holistic warfare. 12. The man who mistook an enema kit for a juice cleanse. There's a thin line between health enthusiast and emergency patient. One man proudly arrived at the hospital clutching an empty enema kit and a bottle of orange juice. His problem? The detox went wrong. Apparently, he'd confused a wellness blog about colon cleansing and thought flush your system naturally meant citrus insertion. The moment he felt a burning sunrise in his intestines, he realized he might have misinterpreted the instructions. Doctors worked quickly to prevent internal damage, while he nervously asked if he could at least absorb some vitamin C. When told he might be lucky to keep his dignity, he said, "That's okay. I'm used to losing that online." Hospitals have saved countless lives, but rarely from something as lethal as blind confidence in internet health tips. Somewhere out there, a juicer commercial just got way darker. 13. The woman who tried to charge her crystals in misuse, the MRI machine. It takes a special kind of bold to interrupt hospital machinery with moonlight magic. A woman waiting for her scan decided the giant magnetized MRI chamber would be the perfect place to supercharge her healing crystals. She snuck in early, placed her amethyst and quartz on the scanning table, and hit a few buttons to start the energy flow. What she actually started was a small-scale electromagnetic apocalypse. The machine's magnets pulled the metal clasp of her bracelet straight into the control panel, shutting everything down mid-operation. Technicians ran in, horrified, while she calmly explained, "It's okay. The universe knows what it's doing." They had to spend 3 hours resetting the system. Meanwhile, her crystals sat there, smugly humming with what I assume was chaos energy. Hospitals treat broken bones daily, but fixing broken logic takes longer. 14. The man who tried to perform. CPR on his goldfish love makes people do wild things, but this might be love's dumbest medical act. A man burst into the ER clutching a goldfish in a Tupperware container, shouting, "It's not breathing!" He begged for CPR instructions. The nurse, trying not to laugh, explained that fish don't breathe air. "Then give it oxygen," he yelled, pointing to the hospital tanks. Before anyone could stop him, he poured the fish into a hospital sink and started gently pressing on its sides, counting out loud. 1, 2, breathe. It was less a rescue and more a splashy crime scene. The fish did not recover, but the staff did gain a legendary story. When security escorted him out, he solemnly said, "Tell Nemo I tried." Somewhere, a veterinarian sighed, a janitor mopped up tragedy, and a hospital learned that love, like CPR, doesn't work underwater. 15. The woman who thought a thermometer was a breathalyzer. A nurse once handed a patient a digital thermometer and said, "Hold this under your tongue." The woman glared and snapped, "Nice try. I haven't been drinking." When they assured her it wasn't a test, she doubled down. "That's exactly what the cops say before they fine you." She kept arguing for 10 minutes until the doctor offered to let her take her temperature herself. She held it at arm's length, blew on it like a Nintendo cartridge, and proudly declared, "See? Totally sober." The nurses had to explain that temperature doesn't measure blood alcohol, and by then, the thermometer had fallen into her coffee. She later told a friend the hospital tried to trick her into a DUI. Somewhere, there's a digital thermometer still in therapy from that day, wondering what it did to deserve being accused of law enforcement. 16. The man who tried to remove his own stitches with a fork. Doctors warn patients not to remove their own stitches. This man took that as a challenge. Armed with a kitchen fork and beer courage, he sat down and decided to save money on follow-ups. He succeeded in reopening the wound, fainted, and fell face-first into his mashed potatoes. When he woke up in the ER again, he told the doctor, "You guys should really use stronger thread." The nurse replied, "You should really use common sense." He asked if he could at least keep the fork as a medical souvenir. They said no. He said, "Fine, but I'm reviewing you on Yelp." The hospital now uses his case in training sessions under how to recognize repeat customers. It turns out the real cost of DIY medicine isn't financial. It's Darwinian. 17. The woman who tried to cook soup on a hospital oxygen tank. One visitor decided hospital kitchens were too slow. She pulled a pot of chicken soup from her tote bag, set it on top of her husband's oxygen tank, and said, "Don't worry, I'm careful." Within seconds, a nurse screamed, "That's compressed gas!" The woman looked offended. "It's fine, I keep the flame low." Luckily, staff shut off the stove lighter before she turned the ICU into a Michael Bay movie. When asked why she thought that was safe, she replied, "It's metal. It looks like a stove." The firefighters who inspected the room didn't know whether to lecture her or congratulate the nurses for catching it in time. Hospitals are full of miracles, But the biggest one that day was not becoming a news headline that began with "Local woman attempts crockpot terrorism." 18. The man who brought his own leech for natural bloodletting. Some people trust modern medicine. Others trust medieval methods. A man came in with high blood pressure and proudly announced he'd been treating himself naturally. When the nurse asked how, he pulled a plastic bag out of his pocket. Inside was a live leech named Dr. Larry. He claimed Larry balances his blood energy. Unfortunately, Larry escaped mid-consultation and attached himself to the nurse's shoe. The man yelled, "He's working! Don't disturb him." Security removed both patient and parasite while the staff added bloodletting via PET to their top 10 list of weird admissions. The doctor calmly advised him to try prescription medicine instead. He refused, saying, "Larry doesn't charge copays." If ignorance were an infection, this guy would have been in quarantine. Somewhere, Larry is still out there, living rent-free in the nightmares of hospital janitors. 19. The woman who brought her cat to translate her symptoms. Doctors often ask patients to describe their pain. This woman brought an interpreter, her cat. She told the ER staff that her feline, Mr. Buttons, could sense her internal organs and would meow in the direction of illness. She placed him on the exam table, declaring, "He'll show you where it hurts." Mr. Buttons meowed once, then leapt onto the defibrillator and promptly peed on it. The nurse nearly screamed. The woman said, "See? He's indicating electrical problems." The staff somehow maintained professionalism while sanitizing every surface in a 5-foot radius. Eventually, the doctor diagnosed her with indigestion, not telepathic organ failure. As she left, she told the nurses, "He'll email you his findings." Hospitals have treated thousands of patients with emotional support animals, but this might have been the first one with a feline intern. 20. The man who tried to recharge his pacemaker with a phone charger. Some people can't stand seeing a low battery symbol. Apparently, not even inside their own chest. A man showed up at the ER insisting his pacemaker was running low because he'd felt a weird vibration and assumed it was a low-power alert. He'd spent 2 hours trying to find a compatible charging port under his shirt before deciding to plug a USB cable into his skin, just in case. When that failed, he asked a nurse if they had an adapter for heart models made before 2020. The cardiologist explained, very slowly, that pacemakers don't work like smartphones, and there's no app for cardiac maintenance. He seemed disappointed, muttering, "Guess I'll have to switch providers." Somewhere out there, a man is still convinced his heartbeat is part of a subscription plan. Modern medicine can extend life, but it can't yet fix people who think the human body comes with a charging port. 21. The woman who thought her ultrasound was a gender reveal party. Hospitals see all kinds of excitement, but few things prepare staff for a patient who arrives with balloons, cupcakes, and a live stream setup for her gender reveal. The twist? She wasn't pregnant. She'd come in for an abdominal ultrasound to check gallstones. When the technician tried explaining, she interrupted, "Don't ruin the surprise. Just tell me if it's a boy or girl." When the scan revealed nothing but an angry gallbladder, she screamed, "You're lying to protect the mystery." Her friends popped the confetti cannon anyway, showering the room in pink dust and regret. Security had to escort them out while she yelled, "You're all part of Big Baby." The doctor sighed, cleaned up glitter for the next hour, and wrote the most exhausted medical note in history. No fetus, just delusion, and excellent party planning. Hospitals handle emergencies, but this was the first time anyone coded for emotional labor. 22. The man who mistook a metal detector for a body scanner. In one ER entrance stood a standard metal detector. To most, it's security. To one man, it was preventive medicine. He walked up, spread his arms, and said, "Just scanning for internal issues." When security told him to empty his pockets, he cheerfully replied, "No need. The truth must be revealed." The machine beeped, and he gasped, "Oh no, it found my bad vibes." He demanded a doctor review the scan. When told it doesn't detect illness, he accused them of covering up radiation results. After arguing for 15 minutes, he asked if he could upgrade to the premium full-body package. Eventually, security guided him out with the gentleness reserved for people who've spent too much time on conspiracy forums. The nurses added him to the "do not reassure" list because, honestly, sometimes logic just makes it worse. 23. the woman who tried to use the defibrillator to reboot her husband's mood. You'd think medical equipment would scare people into caution, but not this couple. The woman stormed into the ER yelling that her husband was emotionally unresponsive. The nurses rushed over with a stretcher, only to find the man sitting calmly, scrolling through his phone. His wife pointed at the defibrillator on the wall and demanded, "Use that! Give him a little zap to restart his enthusiasm." Staff tried explaining that defibrillators aren't for boredom, but she insisted she'd seen it work, miracles on TV. When they refused, she threatened to DIY it and reached for the paddles. Security arrived just in time to prevent her from turning marriage counseling into a literal shock therapy session. As they escorted her out, she shouted, "He's still flatlining emotionally." Somewhere in that ER, a nurse wrote the most poetic report of the week. No cardiac event, just 220 volts of marital tension. Hospitals save lives daily, but humanity keeps testing their patience. Which patient wins gold in medical madness? You decide. You